Hi everyone. As is well known, languages let a wider set of consonants appear in the word initial and medial positions compared to the word final one. The word final position is restricted to a smaller set of consonants or to one single consonant or no consonants, depending on the language. The present study aims to explain these language-specific word final restrictions under the parametric hierarchical system. In this regard, I have three claims. The first one is that the word final restrictions among languages are a type of Latinician weakening stemming from the lack of the final onset licensing, and that Latinician is realized among languages in different ways. That cross-linguistic diversity in word final restrictions does not come up arbitrarily or randomly, but they are specified as a result of the parametric and the subparametric choices of each language. In this regard, I adopt the basic assumptions of the parametric hierarchy account of Biberauer and Roberts for syntax into phonology by proposing new hypotheses and showing that the parametric hierarchies are also valid for phonology. I also claim that the parametric and subparametric choices regarding the word final onset are also connected to the other parameters, subparameters in phonology. There are intersection areas where some floating subparameters come into the play. As a result, the parameters form a network. Within the limits of the study, I argue for four macro parameters. The first one is the final onset parameter. The second one is the branching prime parameter. The third one is the devoicing parameter. And the last one, the point stem to nucleus parameter. If you're interested in my study, you are welcome to my Zoom room. Thank you very much in advance.
My research question is at whether the sonority sequencing principle is language independent knowledge, and if it is, whether it is phonological or perceptual. The sonority sequencing principle suggests that cross-linguistically, at syllable initials, sonority rise is preferred over sonority plateau, which is preferred over sonority fall. Therefore, if Mandarin speakers who arguably lack access to any type of onset clusters show the knowledge of the SSP, then SSP is likely to be language independent. However, Mandarin speakers may misperceive those onset clusters when asked to judge onset clusters of different sonority contours. To address this problem, I combine accepted reading task with transcription task, where the transcription task were used to understand what participants actually perceive and base their accepted ratings on. There are two ways to tease apart the perceptual illusion. One way is to exclude the misperceived stimuli and only compare the accepted ratings of accurately perceived stimuli. Another way is to code the perceived onset cluster when participants misperceive one onset cluster as another onset cluster. If there are significant effects in these two measurements, it will show that the SSP is probably phonological effect. On the other hand, if there are significant effects in accuracy rate or vowel illusion rate, it will show that the SSP is perceptual effect. Either way, it will show that the SSP is language independent knowledge. Thank you. Hope to talk to you soon.
Hello everyone, I'm Matthew King and my poster concerns hyperchoristics in Chilean Spanish. I'm going to very quickly present some data and then talk at the end about how I analyze this data. My crucial point is it must be in a stratal model, and the one I choose is for this purpose is OT. So the data, there are two processes of hyperchoristic formation in Chilean Spanish, which in theory in neutral terms we can think of as aphoresis and apocopy. Aphoresis, here on the slide we see some data, some full names, Ignacio, Gonzalo, Marcelo, Gustavo, and the hyperchoristics are formed by lighting the material at the beginning of the inputs and preserving what remains, although with some segmental changes. So we see nacho, chalo, cello, and tavo. Notably, there's palatalization in the hyperchoristics. And the second process is apocopy, in which data at the end of the input is elided. So we have here Cecilia, Antonia, Agustin, and Eduardo, which becomes Chechi, Anto, Ago, and Edu. And again, we see palatalization with Chechi. Now, the way to handle this in the OT literature has generally been a modification of the classic OT, So you see here the architecture from McCarthy, and the modification is to assume there's some kind of loop between output and eval, and a sort of division of eval. So in the first pass, if you will, you have input-output relations in eval, and in the second part of eval, you have your output-output relations. And that works fine for dealing with a one-process hyperacoustics formation, but it struggles to unify more than one. And that's where the stratal approach comes in. We can, instead of having a loop between output and eval, you just loop the whole thing right back to the beginning, and we in this model assume that there are 3 strata, and that apocopy is located at the stem level and aphoresis at the word level, allowing a unified analysis. So please come see my poster if you'd like to know details. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Joy Kwan, and today my poster presentation is on how L1 Korean L2 English learners perceive and learn English front vowels. So the goal of this study is to investigate how L1 phonological grammar influences L2 perception. Particularly, I examine how phonological phonetic representation, in short PR, is able to delineate perceptual similarity and provide insights for L2 sound acquisition. The PR is based on 2 theories, modified contrastive specification and model of distinctive features. So first, let's look at figure 1. So figure 1 is the Korean L1 hierarchy. So the PR will produce this tree-like structure of phonological grammar. Figure 2 is when English front vowels are plugged into the Korean grammar. So it kind of illustrates how novice Korean learners will perceive English front vowels. Figure 2 is compared with the perception test result from Lian Cho. Figure 4 is assumed as the starting point of L2 acquisition. So when Korean learners are using their L1 grammar, because it is the resource that I have, so they will be just plugging in the English sounds into their first language grammar order. And this I call a strong phonology transfer hypothesis, which means L1 contrastive hierarchy applied to L2 inputs. Figure 5 is the interlanguage grammar. So as they are exposed to more input, they will be learning how to tease apart the confusing vowel pairs, because in the end, the terminal nodes should have one phoneme. In conclusion, the PR framework has advantages in predicting confusing patterns, explaining perceptual similarity, depicting interlanguage development over time. Therefore, a greater focus on phonological representation could produce interesting findings that account more for L2 perception and learnability. Thank you for listening, and if you have any questions or comments, I'll be happy to talk in my Zoom room.
Hello, everybody. In our paper, we analyze class polarity and the Italian subjunctive. We propose a phonological item and arrangement account. The present subjunctive in Italian appears to operate via class feature polarity. You can see this in the alternation between cantare and canti in class 1 and dormire and dorma in class 3. The problem is that on the one side, class features are not found in Italian syntax, and on the other, that polarity is itself a rare and contested operation. We propose a phonological item and arrangement analysis of these patterns without polarity or class features. Instead, we propose a head-clash deletion operation. The exponents of the present subjunctive is a 2-headed structure with both headed E and headed A.
The analysis is working with by using this rather strange exponent, this 2-headed structure. However, what's interesting is that there is direct evidence for exactly this representation from 2 different sources in Italian. The first is, if we look at the pattern of the irregular verbs of the present subjunctive, in those forms, wherever we know that we have root suppletion, we see that this present subjunctive is marked by 2 independent vowels, E and A, which correspond to the headed E and A of the exponent. The second source of evidence is the first person plural and the second person plural of the present subjunctive paradigm, which is exceptionally stressed. And in the positions where they hold stress, we also see these 2 independent vowels, cantiamo, cantiate.
Hi, my name is Mera Sobolosinekuru. My poster is on a phrasal tonology of Ogbia. Ogbia is a language spoken in southern Nigeria. In this study, I looked at the behavior of tone in the noun phrase and in the verb phrase. In this language, contour tones can occur at any position of the word. Their occurrence is not restricted. I also observed that a combination of the noun and a demonstrative to form a phrase resolves to the upstep of the penultimate tone. In the verb phrase, I observe that the imperative verb loses its vowel segment in the phrase, but does not lose its tone because the tone relinks to the adjacent segment in the noun. If you want to know more about the behavior of tone in this language, see me during the presentation. Thank you.
The purpose of this research is about phonological neighborhood density, otherwise known as PND. This refers to the number of words that sound similar to one another. We know that languages optimize for PND in the sense that high-frequency words have neighbors, and we also know that borrowed words become nativized over time. The prediction is that the nativization process results in borrowed words becoming more like native words in terms of their PND. If this is true, then older borrowed words should look more native in terms of the PND than newer borrowed words because they have had more time to become integrated into the lexicon and the phonology of the language. So to test if this is true, I looked at Turkish, which has borrowings from a variety of languages, and we know the relative ages of when those languages were in extensive contact with Turkish. And the results of this study show that the older borrowed words have become more phonologically integrated into the language, and they have more neighbors than newly borrowed words. The results were measured by the PND, and as you see in the graphs, Turkish is at the top because it's the target language, and the languages that are closer to Turkish have been in contact with Turkish longer. The newer languages are at the bottom, and they also have the lowest PND. The hypothesis predicts what we see in figures 1 through 2. It was also shown that high-frequency words tend to be smaller, and low-frequency words have a lower neighborhood density. In figure 3, the longer the word, the smaller the PND. We also see that newly borrowed words have a lower neighborhood density across all word lengths than the older borrowed words. A possible confound would be that perhaps Turkish borrowed words, short words from Arabic and long words from French, and that's why there are more neighbors for Arabic words. However, figure 3 shows that this is not the case, and therefore, in conclusion, this work has shown that there is a correlation between the time depth of borrowings and their PND. To hear more, please join me in the poster session.
We analyze nasal vowels in a version of element theory called presence-free phonology. We'll focus on the alternation between nasal and oral vowels in French. Vowel nasalization happens when a nasal consonant elise, but nasality itself is preserved on the preceding vowel. In standard government phonology, it looks like to be, where the onset in the final syllable is lost. Then the nasal element L survives by linking to the preceding vowel. This GP approach, which relies on linear order, is appealing, but it raises two questions. 3a, can we account for nasalization without relying on precedent relations? 3b, why is nasality preserved, but other properties are suppressed? 6b shows the PFP structure, which captures vowel nasalization. Here, onset deletion involves suppressing the shaded part. But why does this shaded part not include the lowest element L? We'll explain why this happens by referring to the tension between the need for structure building and the need for expressing contrasts. In the poster session, we will also show a parallel between our analysis and the PFP account of the Japanese molar nasal.
Hi, my name's Brandon Prickett, and my poster is about a mechanism for Duke of York mappings and harmonic serialism that I call boomerang constraints. So recent work has argued against harmonic serialism because it can't capture feeding Duke of York mappings. But here I show that a novel family of constraints can provide that framework with a way to overcome this limitation. So what's Duke of York? Well, whenever three phonological processes interact such that the first process creates an environment for the second process to apply in, the second process applies, and then the third process comes along and erases that same environment, you've got feeding Duke of York. Analyses that use this kind of mapping have been argued for in Polish, Arapaho, and Palestinian Arabic. Vanilla versions of harmonic serialism, though, fail to capture Duke of York derivations because they require harmonic improvement. That is, intermediate forms must be more harmonic than their predecessors, which prevents processes that reverse a change made earlier in the derivation. So, to allow harmonic serialism to capture Duke of York mappings, I propose boomerang constraints, which motivate the insertion of temporary structures over the course of a derivation. Crucially, these temporary structures only exist in intermediate forms and aren't present in the surface representation. So over the course of a derivation, they're inserted and then eventually removed automatically. And the nice thing is these boomerang constraints allow harmonic serialism to capture Duke of York because that automatic removal of those temporary structures can violate harmonic improvement. So thanks for listening to this short video. Come to my poster if you want to see a concrete example of boomerang constraints in action, Tableau walking through that example, or just have a discussion about how you could maybe compare boomerang constraints with other approaches to representing Duke of York derivations.
As it is well known, the delineation of singleton Latin intervocalic voiceless stops subdivided not only the Italo-Romance area, but all the contiguous Romance-speaking area of Europe into two major typological zones, the Western Romance and the Eastern Romance. Non-voicing is normal in Italian. However, in medieval Tuscan dialect, in intervocalic position, we can find both a voiced stop or an unvoiced stop. Our poster has the following goals: to describe the diachronic and synchronic context of Toscan Italian lenition and spirantization. Both processes are intervocalic lenition processes, and to provide a structural description of the strong, weak consonant and their relationship to the more complex objects, the syllable and the foot, in order to state locality conditions domain or lenition. That are the locality conditions only dependent on segmental phonological substance? In the theory called the Coda Mirror 2, intervocalic consonants are governed damaged. Thus, transcalenation processes as intervocalic processes can be represented in strict CV theory as the result of proper government. A nonsense can be found in strong templatic position, but it can also occur in weak position. Yet, lenition can modify a syllabic concept when it is in post-vocalic position, while a syllabic concept is not lenited in initial position or after a coda. Thus, the intervocalic position arises the question of the locality in phonology and the relevance of syllabic constituents. The question we arise are, does phonology refer to locality other than through linear syllabic constituents? Is locality highly modular for lenition, or do we have syntactic structural locality effects on phonology? What is the relationship between syntactic locality and the phonological locality in a cyclic syntax phonology approach?
Hello, I'm Nate Shafto. My poster is about deletion in harmonic serialism and the order of its operations. Harmonic serialism is a serial derivational variant of optimality theory, in which candidates at each step can differ from the current input by only a single operation. A major implication of this restriction has been that in HS, deletion is considered a two-step process. The first application will delete the place node, the second application can delete the root node and fully eliminate the segment. There's an as yet undiscussed possibility in this system for deleting the root node first. Surprisingly, there does seem to be empirical backing for this idea, as we can see in data from Catalan and Ancient Latin. In Catalan, there's an opaque interaction between nasal place assimilation and word final stop deletion, so that NK comes out as engma. My analysis here shows that we can analyze this as a two-step process where nasal place assimilation attaches the nasal to the velar place, and then we delete the root node of the K, getting the attested output but being unable to delete the place node at any stage. We can also see in Latin evidence of something similar. Prehistorically, there were word initial GN sequences, such as gnoscere. This was eventually reduced so that only the N was pronounced. However, there was still velar place assimilation for any nasal or coronal segment that was attached to the beginning of that word, while non-coronal ending prefixes were banned from attaching. All of this indicates the persistence of a dorsal node without a root node, which is exactly what this predicts.
Hi, I'm Islam Yusuf, and my poster is on consonant variation as feature typology, a view from Arabic. I want to show that traditional typologies of Arabic consonant phonemes have flaws of cross-classification and lack of an explanatory value. So as an alternative, I'm going to advocate a more theory-oriented, property-driven view to typology advanced by Hyman. I'll explore phoneme classes in terms of which of their constituent features are active in the phonology, arguing that typologies can be couched within a theory of phonological representation. For doing this, I will use a minimalist, parsimonious, and highly abstract model of feature geometry for the analysis called the parallel structures model. Now, the core of the paper treats the Arabic consonant prototypes, qaf, jim, and interdentals to develop such feature-based typologies. For each reflex of these consonant prototypes, I will justify its component features based exclusively on phonological activities and contrasts. To take qaf as an example, there are 4 major reflexes, and table 1 here offers the feature typology of this prototype. The qa reflex has a C-place dorsal feature as it patterns with velar stops in processes like nasal assimilation and local assimilation to velar fricatives. The glottal stop reflex has no evidence for a place feature and hence just a stop C manner close feature. The voiceless and voiced velar stops could go pattern with dorsals, and so they have a C-place dorsal and C manner close features. But the contrast in voicing Soga has the extra voice feature. In the discussion, I point out how the current analysis avoids some false implications about types and conclude that typology shouldn't be about finding types, but rather about providing explanations, making valuable predictions, both empirical and theoretical, and offering a range of theoretically informed schemes to explain variation. To hear more about all this, please join me at the poster session.
Hello, in this poster I discuss the phenomenon of vowel reduction from a cross-linguistic perspective. To be reduced obviously means to be weaker in some regard, but when we discuss weakness, it's usually in regard to structural and positional strength, usually related to accent and not to the inherent weakness or simplicity of segments themselves. Thus, in my poster, I walk you through the strength or complexity or size of elements as represented in element theory and government phonology 2.0. Though Harris laid down the groundwork for understanding vowel reduction as information loss, some typological generalizations failed to be captured by his original proposal, notably, what's in a schwa, what is the correct specification, as well as the case of languages containing novel vowel qualities in reduced syllables not found elsewhere in the language. Crosswhite argues for 2 patterns of vowel reduction, one a prominence reducing phenomenon on the left, the other a contrast enhancing phenomenon on the right. I argue that both of these patterns can be understood as a move to simpler vowel representations in non-prominent positions. Both Brazilian Portuguese and Canadian English demonstrate synchronic and diachronic forms of vowel reduction in unstressed syllables. In both these languages, the trajectory of vowel reduction is predictable along clearly defined paths. Because stressed syllables allow for complex representations and unstressed syllables allow for increasingly less complex representations, centripetal prominence reduction, as seen on the left, can be understood as the elimination of strength correlates, length, headedness, and aperture, while centrifugal contrast enhancing reduction can be connected to language internal rephonologization of these informationally reduced vowels. We conclude that the least prominent reduced syllables allow maximally for a contrast of 3 weak vowels, characterized by a palatal element, a central aperture element, and a posterior labial velar element, likely headed by the neutral element. The true neutral vowels, unsurprisingly, corresponds to the total elimination of all qualitative contrasts. If you'd like to discuss what's in a schwa or how this modelization applies to actual data, please stop by my poster. Take care.